everyone, welcome to Storytelling, the Essential Beginning for the Developing Writer Part 3, our final part. This part is going to look at flooding our children with a world of story resources in order to feed them wonderful ideas and give them the creative inspiration that they need to be able to tell and eventually write their own story. And we'll also look at potentially what we would do with older children, where we could move that to, and finally about developing it within the curriculum. I have quite a lot of photos that I want to show you on this presentation, so I'm going to remove my little bubble head and disappear so that you can see them clearly. Okay, particularly with our young children, we need to have a look at our environment and our continuous provision to think about where are the opportunities for the children to invent during the day. Do we have small world? Do we have story baskets and story boxes for the children to access? Can they get to them daily? Do we have the baskets with the key language in them? Do we sit down and invent using a story mountain and pictures and props with the children? Outside, can the children map and draw? Can they do the things that they do inside? Outside, where do they get to tell their stories and write their stories? If you've been learning stories in your classrooms, can they go and revisit them? Can they go and recall them? We often find comfort in the stories that we know, so where are all the old stories that they can get back out and play with? And think carefully about your story corners and spaces. They don't all have to be as elaborate as the one that you can see on the screen, but building a story corner with the children is important. Creating it with them, modelling how to play in it is useful, and making sure it's up to date with the things that they want to learn and they want to be inventive with. And there's no reason that we can't take our story corners and spaces outside. Here we've got the three billy goats gruff going over the Troll's Bridge outside. And then thinking about resources such as story dice or story spoons. There's a great resource called the Story Box with jigsaw pieces. There's 20 jigsaw pieces inside there, and they're double-sided, and you can put 1, 2 or all 20 together to create a little story. You might get little bags and fill it with great props and items that the children can pull out, and accompanied with the key vocabulary and language that we've been looking at, they can come up with their own stories. Or you might even put characters, settings or objects on lollipop sticks for them to pull out, or the 5-part language structure. So you might have the opening sentences on blue, the build-up sentences on red, and so on. So they can select them and then create their story from them. Think carefully about where do the children get to draw or write their story down. Very young children will map their story. This is the emergent writing, part of the first steps to them recording their own story. Where do they get to do that, both formally and informally? Do they have access to props and costumes and puppets? And then where are the routines where they get to share their story, where they get to sit and tell their stories? And many of you will be familiar with things like story sticks, where they go out, get a stick, add bits to it, and then they can either recount the journey that they went on or use this as an inspiration to create a story. I remember reading a great article from Steve Bowkett about story strings, and older children are good at this, where they take objects, random objects, buttons and shells, as you can see here, and beads. They pop them onto a little bit of string and they use this as inspiration for their own story. So they might have long, long ago in a distant land there was the king of the shells who, and then they can go on. Here is an example of a Year 6 child who's done exactly that and then plotted his story onto a story mountain. It's just a way of being creative, a way of stimulating new ideas. And equally for older children, these resources are quite useful. I like the Mystery Mansion and the Hollow Woods. They're like the Story Box, that would also be great for Key Stage 2, but a series of cards that as you turn them over come up with a narrative. The Hollow Woods looks really fun, and you'll have seen the story cubes as well, where you roll the dice and then they help depict what setting you might have or what character you might use. And also books that I would recommend. There's loads of ideas in the Jumpstart Literacy books, the Jumpstart Story Making, and the Talk for Writing, Creating Storytellers and Writers in Early Years. A lot on how to develop children's storytelling and ideas and games that you might play. So think carefully about your storytelling classroom. Do you have story boxes and bags? Do you have a storyteller's hat and chair and magic carpet? Now, you don't have to have all of these things, but a few. Do we walk into your classroom and think, yeah, they really value story in this classroom, and the children have an opportunity to invent and create on a regular basis? And as it says in the Talk for Writing in the Early Years book by Pi Corbett, we need to make sure that our classrooms are an Aladdin's cave of possibilities, an invitation to play, plentiful with possibilities for pretending, where stories can be learned, developed and created. And thinking about our Key Stage 2 children, where might we take that? Well, just like the 5-part story structure that we looked at before, we can easily change it to still being 5 parts, but maybe using sentence stems like this: cautiously, silently, without warning, at that moment, finally. Because by using those ones, you're more likely to create a bit of a suspenseful story, such as this one. Similarly, you might use what I call the story circles, where we collect a bank of characters for the who, what, when, where, why. We collect all of those ideas and then we use those sentence starters to put them into a little story with the children. So whether you're using the once upon a time, or you're using more of the suspense, or you're using the story circles, still with older children we need to give them regular opportunity to invent and create their own story. And then we need to think a little bit, just before we come to the end of this presentation, about the leadership of it. In order to make sustainable improvement in storytelling in your school, you need to make sure that the culture for storytelling is right, that you have robust systems and opportunities for the children to do that, and we develop our teachers' ability to evoke storytelling in our young children. Because story inventing and telling and performing needs to be nestled within your curriculum. If story is to be truly nurtured, then the curriculum should be designed to intentionally expose children to carefully chosen language and story structures, which feeds their story world and gives them timely, meaningful opportunities to create. So to grow the storyteller, one, we need to teach them. They need to experience high quality teaching with an intentional progressive curriculum. We need to immerse them. They need purposeful immersion and experience within the world of story. We need to feed them. They need regular planned opportunities to hear, read, tell, invent and perform stories. All of that together create the storytelling child. And as I said right in part 1, if they've heard stories, they can tell a story. And if they can tell a story, then they're more likely to write them. So if we go right back to the end, Year 6, can you write me a story? Yes, I can, because they've grown up with the world of hearing them, telling them, inventing them, and working with them. Putting pen to paper is nowhere near as hard when you're filled with all of the ideas. I hope you've enjoyed these presentations and you take more storytelling back to your schools and fill your children with a world of story wonder. Thank you.